Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope everything's good wherever you guys are. So guys, there's some roadblocks here in the Ryan Garcia fight. So apparently the Ryan Garcia fight with Gervonta Davis is falling through because it's not falling through, but it's falling through because of the fact that that Gervonta Davis wants a rematch, mandatory rematch clause, which that seems to be the cause for this fight, or stalling. Basically the fight is stalling because of the fact that Gervonta wants a rematch clause. Now that is ridiculous, by the way. If that fight doesn't happen because of a rematch clause, sometimes I feel like certain things that come out like this is just an excuse for the fight not to happen, and somebody that not really wanting the fight. I mean, why if Gervonta Davis wants a rematch clause, why wouldn't Ryan Garcia put in a rematch clause? Why would that be a stumbling block? Like, you get to fight him twice. Why is that a stumbling block? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that in boxing we just don't get the big fights. The amount of videos that I've made about saying, oh, this fight's not happening and this fight's not happening and this is stalling, it's embarrassing. And for a fight to fall through because somebody wants a rematch clause in there, when rematch clauses are really standard now. I mean, virtually goes in every contract. Every big fight has a rematch clause. I mean, for them to say, oh, well, there's not. I mean, it's just embarrassing. If Oscar De La Hoya is not saying that, oh, well, why does Gervonta deserve? I mean, what do you mean, why does he deserve? It just goes in. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous both ways. I'm not taking any sides here. It's just ridiculous both ways. I mean, why would a fight get stopped because somebody wants a rematch clause? I mean, it's so frustrating and so embarrassing that, you know, a fight of this magnitude is not happening in boxing. I mean, when people say, oh, boxing is dying and boxing, nobody wants to watch it. I mean, what do you expect? When people hear rubbish excuses like, oh, the fight's not happening because somebody wants a rematch clause and the other guy doesn't want a rematch clause. I mean, what do you expect fans to think? What do you expect fans to say? What do you expect fans to like the sport? I mean, fans are going to say this is embarrassing. What do you want? What do they want fans to say? Do they want fans to look at that and still tune in? I mean, it's a fight that a lot of people want, and it's not happening because somebody wants a rematch clause and one side doesn't want to give a rematch clause. Can you believe it? And this is the problem that I have with boxing at this point, that there's no big fights. There's no big fights. The biggest fight probably coming up now is Tommy Fury v Jake Paul, which isn't even a boxing fight, by the way. It's not even a guy, two elite boxers. It's two reality stars, really. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and I'm getting sick and tired of making these same videos where I'm ranting and raving about these fights not happening. I mean, when are things going to change? When is the penny going to drop and these guys going to get together and say, look, let's stop being idiots and let's make the fights? I mean, a rematch clause should not be a reason why a fight doesn't happen. Fair enough, I can understand money. You know, sometimes a fighter feels he's worth more. Okay, even that's a bit petty, but that is understandable. But when a rematch clause, I mean, that's ridiculous. Some of the stuff, when you hear why the fight doesn't happen, and this is the problem, the fighters have too much power. You know, in UFC, when people say, oh, well, slave car, I mean, you can't have it both ways. Dana White makes the fights. You can't have it both ways. Yeah, in boxing, the boxers do have power, but they don't make the fights. They're so picky, and there's this, that, they have so much power where they control what they do. They control what they're doing. So there's no structure. So what happens is that they're so much in control, and the promoters are not today, that effectively the fight's not happening. And the fight not happening impacts boxing, impacts the popularity of boxing, and people say, well, boxing's a dying sport. Yeah, because there's no fights. There's no big fights happening. There's nothing for the fans to look forward to. Like, what is big fight has been scheduled and is coming up? What big fight has been scheduled? I mean, what's a big fight coming up that you can call a big fight right now? Yeah, there'll be some big fights this year, but what is a big fight right now? What big fights have been scheduled for 2023? Not one. Mega fights, like your Garcia Davis, which would be a mega fight. What fights like that have been scheduled? The answer is nothing. Nothing's been scheduled. So, fans, when you think popularity of boxing is dying, you've got the answer. There's no big fights. There's no attention. There's no big stars. When people say there's no stars, yeah, because they don't fight each other. How are you going to become stars if they're great, if the top best don't fight the best? The only way you get stars is when the best fight the best, like Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Roberto Duran, Leonard, because these guys fought each other, and when they fought each other, they made for epic fights because they were all evenly matched. When your best fight the best, there's evenly matched contests where it's going to be great fights. When the best don't fight the best and they're fighting mismatches, nobody wants to watch mismatches. And I'm not saying sometimes we just don't have the characters anymore, and maybe there's a lot more other options, and because of this other combat sports like the UFC that have now rivaling boxing, which is maybe impacting. Maybe there's just other sports on a general which are impacting it. But regardless, you don't help yourself when you're not making the big fights. It doesn't help, because when the biggest names don't fight each other, I mean, how is the sport going to grow? How are people going to be interested? This is what people got to understand. That we're in a sport which effectively doesn't make the big fights. The fights don't get made in boxing. They don't, irrespective of what anybody says, it don't get made. The big fights don't generally get made. The fights the fans want to see take years to make. And we get stupid reasons or rematch clauses why fights don't. I mean, it's ridiculous. And sometimes there'd be a fight which they put a rematch clause in, but I mean, there's no need for it. I mean, it's just like I said, the whole thing about boxing is crap. I mean, from head to toe, it just seems so poor at this point. You know, people get confused about the drug testing and stuff like that, then about making the fights. There's so much gray areas in boxing, which really probably turns a lot of people off. You know, nobody wants to wait around 2 years. I mean, we've not seen Anthony Joshua Fury. These guys have been going back and forth for ages. I mean, look at in the UK, we had Khan and Brook that fought right at the end of his career. And we probably had a fight that could have been epic, turned out to be a complete dud because of the fact that they didn't fight when they needed to fight. Regardless of who you may say is ducking and who you saying whatever, that's irrelevant, because the point is that the fights are not happening. The fights are not happening. And that is a big problem for boxing, because if this keeps happening, then boxing will suffer as a sport. It'll suffer. I mean, boxing will never grow, and it will never get to the popularity it was before, because those guys fought each other. We don't get the big fights on a consistent basis anymore. In boxing, consistently we don't get big fights anymore. There's one or two big fights, but there's not consistent amount of fights. And like I said, last year Usyk Joshua was a big fight, and really that was probably not a great fight. I mean, you knew Usyk was a massive favorite going in. I mean, we had Golovkin, Canelo, another kind of mismatch. So, I mean, like I said, there's not many big super fights that are going to move the needle in boxing anymore. Firstly, there's not a lot of household names. There's not a lot of names which you think move the needle. There are some fighters. And look, the biggest star in the sport is probably Canelo. But when you look at some of the yesteryears, like Mayweather, how big he was. When you look at someone like Mike Tyson, how big he was. You had names and you had people there that really moved the needle. You don't get that anymore. Here. You don't get that anymore. You don't get names like Mike Tyson anymore. And that's a big problem, because without stars like that, without the huge names like that, boxing will never take off. And when fighters aren't even fighting each other, that makes things even worse. That makes things even worse, because effectively the best aren't fighting the best. So how is boxing going to grow as a sport? You know, it's just, the whole thing from top to bottom is a mess. And to be honest with you, I don't really know what can be done. I don't know if anything can be done, because I just think this is boxing now. I don't think anything's going to change. I think this is what fight fans and fighters are gonna do. I think fighters are gonna carry on doing what they're doing, because a lot of them want to take easy fights for big money, because they get paid a lot of money for low risk. Why want to take a bigger fight, which potentially could mean that you lose a lot of credibility, reputation, lose a fight, which might then decrease your salary in years to come, or decrease your pay for the next fight and stuff. It's just like, people don't want to take a risk. They just want to win a world title, then guard it fighting subpar competition, and that's what it is, I think. But look, I think boxing is what it is. It's a sport that we love and will continue to watch and continue to love. But really, if we're truly honest about things, you know, the sport at this point isn't at its strongest, in my opinion. Until they start fighting each other, it's not going to be strong. But that's my take, that's my opinion. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.